Hello, welcome everyone to Coffee and Conversations, part of Plein Air Easton 2021. We're in the Easton Armory building downtown. If you're watching this and you want to stroll over and grab a cup of coffee, there are a few seats left available in the room. I am here today with three guests, and I have to say I'm really looking forward to this conversation because it's a conversation that I feel like I'm going to learn a lot about today. I want to introduce Pete Lesher, Mary Kellogg, and Cassandra VanHooser to the panel today. And I guess really first we'll start out. I'm going to start with a general question, then I'm going to have you guys introduce yourself. And the first question today is, why do we, as a society, as a nation, as a group in general, as in really the world, why do we consistently undervalue the arts in terms of things, let's say science or business, or why do we consistently, it's always the first thing cut, in your opinion? You don't have to get this right. I mean, I'm just curious. Pete?
I don't think we do undervalue art.
Okay.
I think that there are times when, yes, other things seem to overshadow, but I think that actually we see art as an expression of ourselves. We see art as one of the oldest signs of civilization, of defining who we are as a people. And yes, sometimes we get into those situations with budget debates perhaps about school art funding or something like that.
Well, it happens a lot. I mean, it does.
But really fundamentally, I think we as a society recognize that this is part of who we are and needs to be valued because we are less as a people if we lack it. We seek art. We look for art. We value those who make their living at this, who lead us in art. But what I think we learned in school is that we all have an artist in us, and so we all can connect with this somehow.
Okay, Mary?
Picking up on that, it may be the first thing to go in the schools from a budget thing, but volunteers come along to teach the art. And that's because they feel it's so important for children to have that appreciation and identification of who they are, where they live, what they're doing. I know that several times in the past where art has been cut, artists in residence in areas say, I'll step up, I'll do it. I'll teach these kids. And the kids sign up. I don't think there's anything more exciting than to see a child with a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper in front of them and crayons or a paintbrush in their hand and to see what comes out of that. So.
Well, and Cassandra, I'm going to get to you. I get, if you imagine a world without, beyond painting, without music or literature or, paintings, how dull it would be, and why is it the first thing that we kind of go after when we say we need to make some adjustments here? Cassandra?
Well, I love art. My house is full of art, so it's very important to me personally. I think it's very easy to be dismissive of art that you don't like. So I could walk through this building and with 10 different people, and we would all choose something different for our own homes. And so it's subjective. And I think that's why it's easy to cut what you don't personally value. So, I think that's one of the things driving that. But like Pete, it feeds my soul. Like Mary, I love it. It is very important to me personally. But say if this building was full of abstract art, I might not like it as much as I like what I see here. So I think that's one of the driving forces.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, I want to have you guys introduce yourselves to let the audience know who you are. Well, by the way, audience, if you have any questions, if you came here to hear anything specifically, I will try to refer and defer to you and repeat the question online so people can hear it. Please, you're welcome to, because I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. Pete, let them know who you are and where you're from. And
So I'm Pete Lesher. I'm the chief curator at Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in St. Michael's, so right here in this community.
And where'd you go to school? When you study that type of thing?
I'm trained as a historian, Lafayette College and Columbia University.
Great.
And that's what got me. So that's what I bring to the Maritime Museum is historical background, and that's what I bring to this conversation is that historian's perspective.
And would you grow up here?
I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, but I spent summers here because my family is from Easton, my mother's family. So I'm surrounded by cousins.
And if people want to talk to you about this discussion afterwards, they can catch you at the log canoe race this weekend. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, Mary.
I'm Mary Kellogg. I'm the co-founder of the Tilghman Watermen's Museum. My husband and I founded it maybe 10 years ago. My education, I was a nurse, but I've always had an appreciation for art. When I was a child, my parents took us to art museums. They exposed us to art. And I think that early on, that gave us an appreciation of art. We founded the museum because Tilghman was changing, and we felt that we needed people to know not only what it had been, but what it is today, in hopes that we can keep a portion of that for the future. And art is very, very important for that, as one of our main missions is collecting art by Tilghman artists or pertaining to art.
And where did you grow up, Mary?
I grew up in the coal regions of Pennsylvania.
Great, okay.
And came to when I married my husband, who was from Maryland, came to Maryland.
And how long have you been on the shore?
About
10 years?
No, about 20 years.
20 years.
20 years.
Okay.
We actually bought our property in 1986 and built and moved here in 99. Well, so it's over 20 years.
Great. Cassandra?
Cassandra VanHooser. I am the Director of Economic Development and Tourism for Talbot County. I grew up in Tennessee. I'm a little old farm girl from Middle Tennessee, grew up on a dairy farm. And I was a travel writer at Southern Living magazine, have a degree in agriculture, but gravitated toward the art of writing. And I was a travel writer at Southern Living, and then this is how I found Talbot County. And so when there was a job open for the tourism director 8.5 years ago, I applied for it because Talbot County has always been a place that I loved. And I covered the Mid-Atlantic, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and DC for Southern Living. And when I made a list of places that I'd like to be, Talbot County was in the top 6.
Nice.
Yeah.
When you were covering it for Southern Living, what was it about this that stood out to you in terms of making your top 6?
So I always say I'm partial to pretty. And I think Talbot County is amazingly beautiful. It also has this very rich Chesapeake culture, which is what both Pete and Mary interpret at their museums. And so there's the culture, the food, amazing food, the crab, the oysters, the rockfish, and then it's a very special spot on this planet. And so it just, again, speaks to my soul. And I love it here.
I think so many people say that, what a special spot it is, and it's always wonderful to hear. And it's interesting to try to quantify it. Then the next question is, what is Talbot County, and again, you don't have to get this right, but what is Talbot County going to look like in 100 years? And the reason I'm asking this question is because this is the history of the landscape, as a historical record. And these paintings being painted here this week, 99% of them, I'll make we're looking at an ag painting. We're going to talk about that collection as well as we go through this. What is Talbot County going to look like in 100 years? Will there be another pandemic 100 years from now?
Well, I'll start as with a historian's perspective and answer your question by looking back 100 years and what would somebody from 100 years ago recognize in Talbot County today? 100 years ago, Talbot County was a predominantly agricultural landscape. It was an economy that was dominated by seafood and by farming. And if you look at Talbot County today, seafood's diminished, but it is still present. And yes, we have less acreage being tilled today, but it still dominates the landscape. And so you can still recognize a person, I think, from 100 years ago, yes, might be stunned by some of the things that they see, but they would still recognize Talbot County. There's something fundamental about what we see in our landscape. And I hope that if I were able to come back 100 years from now, or my grandchildren, that they would recognize the Talbot County that I know, that we will still see, I hope, a landscape that is predominantly agricultural, that we will still see. I mean, Talbot County has 600 miles of shoreline. The land and the water are so delicately intertwined. And yes, the waters are rising, and yes, that shoreline is going to be different 100 years from now, and it will take a different shape. But I think we will still recognize that delicate intertwining of land and water here and still value that access to the water that we have today. I think that there are a lot of elements here that we can look forward to. And yes, we will probably be stunned by changes in technology and the development of Easton and St. Michael's in our municipalities, but there will be something here that we recognize. Easton's downtown, St. Michael's downtown, Oxford's, Morris Street. Somebody from 100 years ago would certainly recognize them today, and I would expect that that will be true. I hope that will be true. As a historic preservationist, I hope that will be true 100 years from now.
Cassandra, is going to change that much? We're going to stay the same? Obviously not stay the same.
Well, I think if you could sum it up in one word, you would probably say different. And yet, I'm like Pete. I'm really hopeful that there are people here who value the working open space and the beautiful waterscapes that we have here enough to try and preserve it so that people 100 years from now can see the same place that we see here and value now. So I spend time looking at these historic photographs and trying to imagine how, you see how much it has changed, and trying to imagine as you look ahead. And I don't think any of us can really wrap our mind around all of the things that will change. But again, hopefully the landscape is one of the things that we'll be able to recognize.
Mary, you've certainly been in Tilghman, where there's a lot of change happening.
There's a lot of change happening in Tilghman, but we still have families. They say the Hataways, the Cummings, the Murphys, they have family members who are there and more or less carry on. And one of the questions that people ask is saying, oh, is that one related to that one? Well, maybe back a long time ago they were, but now there's different families. And I think as long as the family connections remain, that carries it through. 100 years from now, I was going to say what Pete said. We have the water, we have the land. And
I guess we have put in some restrictions
Right.
to try to take care of that.
Right. And I think that's now with the critical areas, they're very stringent in their regulations. And I think Talbot County is stringent in their regulations. You can't just put something up. You have to go through a long process of getting your permits. And it might be onerous to be going through, but if you look at the end result, and if you look at the greater good is that you're not going to have a Walmart built in the middle of Tilghman.
Right.
There's space for it, but we're not going to have that.
I've got to say, I think you guys are, I'm glad to hear that. You're a little more hopeful than I was in terms of like 100 years. I just see the technology progress. Now who knows, we could use it for good. How do you three individuals, Mary, how do you look at a piece of art?
Well,
Specifically the paintings we're talking about.
it is subjective. And I will say what Cassandra said about abstract art does not resonate to me at all. It's not always, doesn't have to be pretty, but it has to tell a story. I need to learn something from that. And I look at some of the farm photos that are up here. My husband and I had a farm. So that resonates with me. And I say, oh, yes, I like that. The second thing I say to myself is, do I want that hanging in my house? Is this something that I want to look at every day? And unfortunately, I don't have the money, nor do I have the wall space, but I know that just in many of the paintings I've seen painted this week, they tell me a story, and I know where some of them are painted, and I think that's a picture, that's a photograph in my mind, and that's how I look at it. It's what tells me a story, what resonates with me.
Okay, let me just add a little bit to that. So for this discussion, I want to just throw this little caveat in, and the same questions, but both ancient and contemporary art philosophers argue that art as an art object represents the physical and mental world of human beings that is not only personal, but also associated with society in general. And they follow that up by saying that the reason that it's a valuable historical record is because the emotion, and I'm going to take this painting right here. Cassandra, how do you look at a piece of art?
So it's funny because I have spent some time thinking about why do I like this piece and not this piece. So I'll talk about this piece. This is, to some people, just a field of corn. But to me, that's an important agricultural crop on the Eastern Shore and to the chicken industry here. I also love sweet corn on a 4th of July picnic table or at a farm dinner like we had last night. You see that sun peeking over, that's early morning sun. It's kissing the top of those tassels. You know, as a child, we would run through the corn. My brothers and I would race through the corn to see who got, to a row. And then, I can see the corn spiders, because you'd always run face first into a corn spider, So, and I'm getting chill bumps telling you about this because that's what this painting says to me. And that's why I love it so much. The light, the color, and the memories that it evokes for me.
Did you ever get a corn stalk blade in your eye, hit your iris? Oh, it was the worst pain. I used to cut the backhoe and it went right. I was like, oh, that was the worst pain I've ever had in my life.
No, but I hate a corn spider to this day.
Right. Pete, how do you,
Well, look, we are all products of the culture in which we were raised, and to some extent we rebel against that. We break out, we do something new, but we are products of that, and the artists among us are no different. And so the art that our artists produce is a reflection too of the culture and of that individual's vision. So when you create an art object, you're giving importance, you're giving emphasis to that scene, you're giving a particular perspective, good, bad, or angry, or some emotion about this particular scene. And this applies to portraiture, this applies to landscape painting, this applies, so but it does imply, when you create an art object of this field of corn, that this is important, that the artist has selected this subject matter, this particular perspective, this particular light. Yes, they've seen it, but there's an act of selection in doing this. And so I'm curious, why this? What is it about this that can give me some insight into this artist or this place or this culture that shaped?
Well, We're going to take a quick break right after this because I think Pete answered all my questions that I had for the rest of the show with that answer. I was really asking, how do you look at, and that's what kind of came across to me when I started doing some research on this, is like, taking an extra second and understanding that there is an emotional side to, like, why did they pick it? And letting yourself just view it from that, whether it's abstract or, and I get the abstract reference, but just letting yourself sort of look at it from that sort of perspective was very, very interesting. And then when you talk about a historical record, which is what we're going to get into in the next segment, it becomes even a little bit more interesting. You're watching Coffee and Conversations. I do want to make another plug. If you are an artist out there watching, these videos that Nick has made in between the as little commercial breaks are excellent viewing if you are whatever level of artist you are at. They are really, really interesting. He's got a great little soundtrack behind him, and you can learn a heck of a lot. I've watched them all, and they're really, really cool to see and enjoyable to watch and informative. We'll be right back with Coffee and Conversations. Thanks for watching.
That's an interesting thing too.
Yeah, you just pop it in your Velcro?
Yeah, my Velcro with my little baby too.
Some weekends seem to last forever when nonstop applications become nonstop discovery. And in the heart of Maryland's Eastern Shore hides an annual haven of art, instruction, and entertainment. The country's largest outdoor painting competition, Plein Air Easton. There, you can trade in the ordinary routine for an energetic festival. Exchange housework for a night or two at a bed and breakfast. And swap never enough time with we should do this more often. Take a weekend for yourself to explore, to paint, to experience something new. Your immersive art weekend begins at PleinAirEaston.com.
Welcome back to Coffee and Conversations, part of Plein Air Easton 2021. We're here with Pete Lesher, Mary Kellogg, and Cassandra VanHooser in our second segment for what we hope will be 4 segments. If I can muster up some questions for these guys because they have some very, very interesting views. And this has been a very, very interesting topic for me to discuss because I really knew nothing about it. I want to start off by going in a little bit in depth about your each individual projects concerning art. And Cassandra, specifically maybe with the agricultural development that you sort of spurred into Plein Air Easton over the last couple of years and that sort of thing. Can you talk about that whole project? We're looking at some paintings here. Maybe start with what we're looking at and
Sure.
how you got it going.
Absolutely. So the way we got it going was Jessica and Al said to me, we want to make a stronger connection with the agriculture community. Agriculture is such an important industry to our county, and it's also, as we've established in our previous segment, it's so important to the way our landscape looks here. So we've had people, though, standing at the farm gate painting, and we've seen that view. So what we wanted to do was connect the farmers and the farm families with the artist in a very meaningful way so that the artist gets access to the farm, so they're painting inside the farm and not from the farm gate.
Sure.
And so what has grown from this connection, so we started out, we did a farm to table dinner the first year, and I think that was 6 years ago. We had our farm to table dinner last night, and a bunch of us got together, made food, put it on the table, and we had the breaking of bread and connecting, one-to-one in that communal atmosphere of eating. So what's grown from that is the Beauty and Bounty, the Agriculture Plein Air collection that showcases the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And what we're trying to do is tell the story of agriculture on the Eastern Shore as it is now, and be able to share that. Because, there are a whole lot of things about agriculture that people don't understand. We all eat 3 meals a day. That's all comes from the agriculture industry. But this field, for example.
Right here.
I love this painting because it shows the double cropping of wheat that's been overplanted with soybeans. So that's a look that you would see here on the Eastern Shore. You have the beautiful old farmhouse. Those are sort of transitioning away. We don't have as many of those. So I love this field painting for those reasons. And it tells that story of the 2 crops that we just talked about.
Nick, if you can go to the next slide while I ask this question. Cassandra, I'm sure that the artists have totally loved eating the dinners and the food. I'm positive of that, and then having access to the more to paint inside of someone's farm. What has the response from the agricultural community been in terms of something that was brand new as an idea?
Well, I have to tell you, we had almost 200 people at dinner last night, and many of them were from the local farm community. So they have really embraced this and embraced the painters, I think. So this painting here really sums up to me why we did this project.
Okay.
You have a painter standing inside a barn of wheat straw. He's looking out. You see someone going about their work day. You see modern agricultural equipment. And then you see the soaring capacity of those grain elevators. So that huge industrial looking complex there shows the magnitude of the agriculture collection. So, that is very, very different than just a pretty painting from the farm gate. So this really sums up to me why this collection is important.
Pete, is this picture important as an historical record? Is it going to look the same in 100 years in Talbot County?
Well, that I can't tell you, but it is a document of our time, and a colonial historian by the name of Ben Labray encouraged me and others. Historians usually are sources. We look to the written record. But he encourages historians to look at art, to look at literature, to look at poetry, even to look at music as historical sources. And a painting like this can be, maybe will be, one of those historical sources of our time. It's always, when you're collecting contemporary history, it's always hard to judge
Right.
what is it that will emerge from our own times that hasn't yet stood the test of time. And so contemporary collecting, no matter whether you're collecting art or collecting something else, it always has that particular challenge.
In music, it's the one thing that they say is Bob Dylan. You can make sure that Bob Dylan's going to last through
Well,
whatever.
he's old enough that he's started to stand that test of time, you see.
Right.
He's not something that came out just last week. But that test of time is one of our challenges. Working in a museum environment, it's not hard to buy into that because we teach with objects, and some of our objects just happen to be art. And yes, we collect historic art. Yes, I love to bring in art from the 19th century and the early 20th century. And well, no, we don't.
Well, I'm not the
Our museum does not. Yeah, but we do also, because Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum is a museum that is also about a living culture. We have that obligation to collect from this living culture. We have this obligation to collect from today, from recent times, and so we're making some guesses about what's important out there. And so yes, we have collected out of art produced by Plein Air. There have been some great opportunities out there, and if prompted, I'll tell you about one of those.
I'll make sure to hit that prompt. Mary, what spurred you to make to make a museum that was probably, I know certainly well loved now, well needed at this point? You've kind of created a need for a museum down there.
Well, we started by collecting oral histories. And we felt that that was important so people could tell their stories and we would have that historical reference. And then art became very important because one of the watermen on Tilghman, Bill Cummings, was a very respected waterman, but he was also a self-taught artist. And he never took a photograph. He never had an art lesson. He went to the library and studied anatomy. He went to Washington to the galleries and studied and copied. And then he began to put his memories down on canvas. And what Bill has done has documented a way of life that is still going on. Now, some of the things, seine hauling is not done that much, but it's what he did. So he put his memory of that down on canvas. And he says that. We have a 15-minute little film on Bill talking about why he did what he did. And yet when you look at his paintings and you look outside in Tilghman at what the Watermen are doing, many of them are still doing the same thing. They're tonging for oysters. Bill has paintings maybe 40, 50 years ago of him as a child tonging for oysters. They still do that. So I'm thinking, I don't know about 100 years, but maybe 50 years from now, if there's oysters, they're still going to be tonging for oysters. Another local artist, Colleen Sadler, she has this wonderful painting called The Way It Was. And it's a waterman, her husband, with his dog, looking out into the bay, but there's a workboat that's crumbling. And what she's depicting in that is a way of life that is going away. You know, as the water's declining, the oysters, the crabs, rockfish, other fish, you know, it's all in peril because of pollution and regulations. So there is this little poignancy about, is this going to remain the same? But yet, I live on Knapp's Narrows, and every morning at 4 o'clock, those crab boats go out, one after another, after another. And when our art in the museum, there are crab boats, there are oysters, But also we have artists that have come. Nancy Tankersley, for instance, has documented one of the men, Robbie Wilson, building conch traps. He invited her into his shop. Another artist, Mark Castelli, is documenting the Kinnaman family building a boat. And he's been doing that over a year. So, you know, there's people that want to protect that and people that want to send it forward. And people think sometimes that Watermen are, you know, rough and tough and grumble, but they like artists. They like the artists. They invite the artists in. And before Plein Air, we get questions about, are those artists coming back?
Right.
And sometimes you get, they haven't painted me.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, well, gee, I'm sorry, you know. But, and I look at that, that's what the museum's about. We not only want to say the way it was, but we want to say the way it is and hopefully going into the future with that.
Pete, is the combination of the history that Mary is working on documenting in Tilghman and the new ag history that Cassandra has built over the last 6 years, is that important to Talbot County as a whole in general? That's sort of like getting both sides of that?
I hope so. You know, this is about, you know, whether you're approaching it from oral history or from art. This is about memory, and sometimes the best way to capture memory, to cement memory. You know, we tell stories, we tell them over, and in the repetition. But also an artwork can capture that story because it can remind us of that scene. It can remind us of that event. It can remind us of that person or that encounter in a way that inspires that story to come back and to be retold to new audiences. And so this is a very human experience about what we do in our own families and passing on memories, what we do in our community about preserving memory. And art is a great way, one of the key ways, I think, for us to crystallize that memory of our community.
So I'm going to ask the audience members now, having discussed what we've discussed over the last 20 minutes, when you look at this painting here done by Stuart Burgess White, I believe, can you see a historic? I've never looked at anything. It really, this excited me because it's a new way for me to look at a painting when I sort of started going through this as a historical record. Do you see that a little differently now? I know, Joan, you've been looking at the paintings pretty hard as they've been coming up. Do you see a historical record? Do you see how that is important to be around, that somebody actually documented that through the painting? You don't have to answer. Maybe you're all, yes, go ahead.
I look at these paintings as a nation's calling card because all these paintings are like our postage stamps and our currencies, like when we had our educational currencies at the turn of the century. It gives the world a chance to see us at a moment in time, our history, what we are about, and so on and so forth. So each one of these, you can look at it and they become a nation's calling card. They get to see how we are as a nation, much more than when we hear politicians talk or talking heads on TV. They actually see somebody that's taken the time to really get into the image that they're looking at and trying to convey that to an audience through art. That's, I think, great that nation's calling card.
Ryan, I'll repeat that now. The gentleman said it's a nation's calling card, and repeated that a couple times, saying that it's a way for us to really see a moment in time. And again, that's something that sort of got drilled into me as I was sort of researching that. Thank you very much for that.
Can I tell you why we picked this painting?
Yeah, tell us why you picked the painting.
So this is not modern agriculture. So this is Mutt and Marty, and they're a pair of flax Belgian draft horses. and they're out at Tuckahoe Steam and Gas, and they're pulling a sled, and they're in full pull here. But you see the people in the background watching it. So this is a form of entertainment now. So instead of picking like an old tractor, we're showing modern agriculture. We're showing agriculture as it is. But this is how the farm community entertains, perceives
Sure.
entertainment,
Yeah.
is going and seeing the old steam engines and the old draft horses. This used to be the way we plowed a field, but it is no longer. But now it's entertainment, and we have presented it as thus. And so for each of the agriculture paintings that's in this collection, made possible by a very generous donor, by the way,
Yes.
we've been able to collect over 4 different years. We'll be buying paintings this year to finish the collection. We have 11 now, and we will probably end up with 14 or 15 total. It's going to rotate throughout the region to help tell the story of agriculture on Maryland's Eastern Shore.
Yeah, I just think it's great.
And one of those things is, the Tuckahoe Steam and Gas show that we have here that corresponds every year, or coincides every year with Plein Air.
Well, you can get more of information on the ag show or the ag exhibition in the event guide that's available online through the Avalon Foundation. And I know it's on display over at the Academy this weekend. Today, you can go over and take a look at it today. I think they're actually.
It's actually the featured exhibit at the Academy Art Museum through the month of July, and it stays up until the 29th.
And I think it's been state recognized. That's sort of recognized by the state. Mary, we're gonna ask one more question. We're gonna take a break quick. Would this be valuable in schools to try to teach history versus somebody reading something, or a textbook as a historical record?
Well,
Pete, Mary?
A picture tells 1,000 stories. Children will look upon it as, oh, that's really cool. Look at that big horse. They may look on it as entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe later on, they'll say, what was it used for? And that becomes the historical perspective. There are some vineyards in France that currently are using draft horses to plow in between the vines because it does less damage than tractors. So it's still being used.
Right. That's great. Listen, we're going to take another quick break, and we're going to ask a couple more questions when we come back. Thank you again for watching. This is Coffee and Conversations. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it. Yeah, should I go?
The backlit still life, which I've been doing a lot of. So backlighting is fun. And
One of America's most beautiful stretches of road weaves through the heart of Talbot County. And for 1 week every July, that road comes alive with America's best representational painters. Now in its 17th year, Plein Air Easton is the nation's largest and most prestigious outdoor painting competition and festival. Not only is there incredible art to discover in Easton, the hub of the festival, but we're also expanding our events in Oxford, St. Michael's, and Tilghman Island, with exhibits all across Talbot County, each evolving with fresh paintings throughout the festival. There has never been a better time to explore the area's tidal shorelines, verdant fields, and vibrant small towns. Make plans to be inspired again through the arts, and to take home a painting of Talbot County's picturesque landscape to memorialize your immersive art adventure. It's all here at Plein Air Easton. To start your art road trip, visit pleinaireaston.com.
In Easton, part of Plein Air Easton in 2021. We're in our last segment here with Pete Lesher, Mary Kellogg, and Cassandra VanHooser. And we're going to talk about the festival at the end of this segment, what's going on this weekend. Before we get to any of that, Pete, I wanted to talk to you. I forgot to mention in the last segment the collection and collecting that you folks are doing at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. And
Well, we do get to do some contemporary collecting. We have had the opportunity through the generosity of some donors to, just like the county's agricultural collection, to collect from Plein Air, and from the work that is being produced before our eyes, literally before our eyes during this festival. And one of the most poignant moments that I can recall in this was several years ago now, 2008. I had interviewed a Tilghman boat builder by the name of Maynard Lowry,
Yeah.
and I got to interview him. This is an oral history recording. I interviewed him right outside of his shop, and I remember him saying about this ramshackle shop that he had right on Knapp's Narrows. He said, "Yeah, this place has about had it, and so have I." And an artist from Plein Air captured this shop on Knapp's Narrows, Daisy DePutot, painted this shop in that wonderful, that ramshackle condition as it was that summer. I think 2 years later, that shop was gone.
But Maynard's not gone because I know our Tilghman Museum has 3 paintings of Maynard.
That's
Because people consider him a Tilghman treasure.
Yes.
So different artists have painted him and donated them to the museum. And so we tell a story about Maynard Lowry as if he were still here. So
that's great.
Absolutely.
So, but you got that paint.
One of these other paintings, she painted his shop, but she also painted him.
Right.
A portrait of him with a catboat in the background. He, in his later career, he was building catboats. My article on him was entitled "Maynard Lowry, the Catboat Man,"
Right.
Because this is what he was known for, with a pipe in his mouth.
His dog at his side.
His dog.
His dog Greta.
Captured him in a way that captured that persona, that feeling that he gave to people, that welcoming. You know, he could talk to anybody. 5 weeks after she painted that, just 5 weeks after she painted that painting, he was tragically killed in a car accident. And here's that opportunity. And so this is something that it's not long in the past, but this is one that I have no doubt about in terms of standing the test of time. And Plein Air captured that moment in time in the nick of time.
Well, I remember when they started the award, and it was the Vanishing Landscape Award, and there was a house on Route 50 that sat back, and somebody painted that thing, and they actually won the grand prize that year. Well, later on, like a year later, I was running the television station at the Avalon, and they said, well, they're moving this house, go film it. And I went to go film it, and it was the same house that won the Vanishing Landscape Award, and they moved it down on to Denton Road. And I was like, well, heck, it's not vanishing, it's just moved. But the one that gets me every time I go to Oxford is Easton's Market, because it was done in plein air, and now it is a modern. The market's still there, but it's a modern truck, like it's a F-350 with and there's a person sitting in there. That is totally changed. And Cassandra, it kind of leads into, this is all done in plein air. You wanted to sort of
But
like,
I think that's really important, that the whole definition of plein air, painting in the outdoors, you're painting what you see. And I think that's why the Plein Air Festival has endured and grown over 17 years, is that you can literally stand there, correspond with the artist, and see what they're painting. So it makes this triangle. You're connecting with the artist, you're connecting with the place, and then if you choose, you can walk away with a memento from that moment. And to me, that is what the magic is of plein air. And so for these ag paintings, it's capturing a moment in time, it's capturing something that's actually there. And then we've put together that collection, like I said, in which everyone in here needs to go over to the Academy Art Museum and see it. I'll put in a shameless plug.
no, you should.
But it opens today and runs through the end of the month. Being able to see what they're actually painting and how they're interpreting it is the magic of plein air to me.
Right. Mary, what do you see in this painting right here behind me?
Hard work, Mary.
I do. I see very hard work. Coming from a farming background, yes.
Right.
I see blood, sweat, and tears. That's what I see.
Great. We're going to finish up with one more question. Pete, this is historians have used art as evidence to learn about the physical and mental worlds of their past. Okay, I'll repeat that. Historians have used art as evidence to learn about the physical and mental worlds of the past. That not only includes political events, economic trends, and social structures, but also the history of culture, everyday life, and ordinary people. I have written down here, Pete, discuss.
Well, it's actually the last part of that I think I most appreciate. We've been through cultures where only those who are in leadership positions, only those who are moneyed or propertied or something like that get memorialized. But capturing everyday society is an opportunity that I think is something that we have learned to value in history, in understanding that it's about all of us, and using art as an insight into what our society values. And today I'm thrilled in seeing what I see captured in art. We have to learn to read art of the past. It's the job of the art historian to learn to read and interpret this, and tell us those stories about cultures that are still part of our roots, but that might seem like a very foreign land if we were able to go back.
Mary, do you think that if someone were to paint plein air in other towns, not that they would be as pretty as Easton, because Easton is gorgeous, as we established earlier, but do you think you'd see a commonality inside the country from community to community of the everyday life, and how maybe it's not as vicious as we see? Are we with the talking heads the gentleman was talking about? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, see, I think that's in the eyes of the plein air artists. And I think that the plein air artists do want to capture where they are. When you look at some of their portfolios, It's, oh, look at that. Look at that place. But it's something that's a common, everyday thing. It's not a monument. It's not a big marble building. It's a farmhouse. It's a farm truck. It's a boat. And I think comes from the artist as to what they see, as to how they interpret it, and that's where that commonality goes.
The everyday life and the culture of everyday life. Cassandra, is that what you look for in this type of art?
Well, I think it's capturing the magical moment of everyday life and helping you see it in a different way. This, for example, is the Mount Air grain elevator that's on Route 50. And if you've ever driven up and down Route 50, you've passed it just south of Easton. The artist, Zufar, saw this. To him, it looks like a rocket getting ready to launch. He's also painted it in the very, very, very early morning light. You see the planets there and the American flag on top of it. And so he's presented it in such a way that it's amazing. But it's a common thing that we see every single day in Talbot County.
I've got to tell you, this conversation has certainly.
She's never seen it that early in the morning.
And now you get to see that's
a great painting.
I've got to tell you, this conversation has really it's advanced me in being able to look at art, and again, not just as a pretty picture, not just as a well done painting. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm glad the topic came up because I knew nothing about it. Afterwards, I'm going to show you two an abstract, which I learned about last year, which helped me this year talking about the interview last year. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Cassandra. Do you guys have, we cover enough for you? Is that you good with everything? Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Don't forget the Plein Air Festival. You can still see it in Tilghman, Oxford, and St. Michael's today. It all comes back to Easton this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It'll be here between the Easton Armory and the Academy Art Museum. Don't forget Local Color, which is right across the street at the Christ Church. There are going to be nearly over 1,000 paintings downtown, in downtown Easton this weekend. Most of them freshly done, 600 or 700 freshly done this week. I've grown to, I didn't understand this festival 17 years. I've been involved with it for 17 years. I've grown to love this. I promise you, it will be a wonderful experience for you to come down. And if you've seen nothing else, see that exhibit in all the exhibits, the ag culture exhibit, but the exhibit that they're gonna make this weekend of the two competition paintings, make sure you see that inside of the Academy Art Museum this weekend. You can find all of it online at AvalonFoundation.org, PleinAirEaston.com. Thank you all for watching. I hope to see you downtown this week. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.